Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Joint Subcommittee on Human Services. Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Senator Canizaro. Senator Dondero Loop. Here. Senator Wynn. Here. Senator Severs-Gansert. Senator Titus. Here. Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Dickman. Here. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Howdigi. Assemblywoman Monroe Marino. Here. Assemblyman Watts. Here. Assemblyman Yeager. Here. And Chair Gorlow.
I am here. Please mark members present when they arrive. They were just here. They'll show up pretty soon. Things are going to be a little discombobulated today. I don't get to say that word very often, so discombobulated. We just had some pictures taken from the Senate side, so we've got a couple of them that are still coming in, and then at 8:30, the Assembly needs to go take pictures, so we'll take a brief recess. Because of that, we're going to try to get through at least one budget, so we're going to start with the TANF budget, so we'll take it just a little bit out of order. And with that, Mr. Nichols, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, committee members. For the record, my name is Colby Nichols. I'm a program analyst with Fiscal Analysis Division. As you indicated, we are going to go slightly out of order, so I direct the subcommittee's attention to page 19 of your packet for the TANF budget account. There are two major closing issues associated with this account, the first of which is TANF caseload changes, and discussion of that begins towards the middle of page 19. As recommended by the governor, there's additional TANF block grant revenues of $3.9 million in fiscal year 24 and $4 million in fiscal year 25. That's to align funding with projected caseload changes for the TANF program. However, as with other departmental caseloads, the agency provides updated caseload projections in March of 2023. Those updated caseload projections are based on actual caseloads and costs through February as opposed to the October 22 that are included in the governor's recommended budget. There's a table towards the bottom of page 20. And looking at that, you'll see the difference between the GovRec projections as well as the projections for the TANF caseload included in the March 2023 update. And you'll see a net reduction of about 2,000 anticipated recipients in both fiscal year 24 and 25. There's a table on page 21 showing the funding difference between the GovRec caseload decision units and those included as reflected with the March 2023 caseload update. Just briefly note that there will be a technical adjustment that's noted in this document to align the funding that's in the base budget with the fiscal year 22 actuals, resulting in additional TANF cash assistance expenditures of $4.2 million in fiscal year 24 and $4.1 million in fiscal year 25. That is reflected in the table on page 21. Some discussion during the budget hearing regarding the changes to the TANF caseload, and in response, the agency indicated that the TANF caseload is anticipated to slowly return to pre-pandemic levels and then remain relatively stable over the forthcoming biennium. The TANF caseload is typically fairly closely associated with the job market in the state as well as the unemployment rate. There are several factors, pandemic-related factors, that have impacted the caseload in the current year, fiscal year 23. However, as I said, these are anticipated to slowly, the caseload is anticipated to slowly return to pre-pandemic levels. So the decision for the subcommittee this morning is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of a net decrease of TANF funding totaling $2.0 million in fiscal year 2024 and $2 million in fiscal year 25? That's to align the funding in decision units M200 and M201 with those updated March 2023 caseload projections, as well as that noted technical adjustment to increase TANF grant revenue and cash assistance authority by $4.2 million in fiscal year 24. $4.1 million in fiscal year 25 to align funding in the base budget with those actual fiscal year 22 expenditures.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? You seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. So moved. And a second? Second. Any discussion? You seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Colby Nichols for the record. The second major closing issue associated with this account is the transfer of TANF funding to the Child Assistance and Development budget. Discussion of that begins on page 22 of your packet. The governor is recommending a transfer of TANF block grant funds totaling $10 million in each year of the biennium. However, upon discussing this with the governor's finance office and the agency following the budget hearing, this is essentially an extraneous decision unit. So the recommended transfer or the recommended allocation of TANF block grant funding, that will be discussed as a major issue in the Child Assistance and Development budget. However, as indicated towards the bottom of page 23, This recommendation here in the TANF budget is not intended to reduce the number of clients served or the benefit amounts of the TANF cash assistance caseload. Therefore, approval of this decision unit is not needed to effectuate that recommended increase in TANF grant funding for the Child Assistance and Development budget. And the Governor's Finance Office is in concurrence with this analysis. So based upon that information from the agency and the concurrence from the Governor's Finance Office, fiscal staff would recommend the subcommittee not approve this decision unit regardless of whether the subcommittee wishes to approve those additional TANF revenues in the Child Assistance and Development budget. Should the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the additional TANF grant revenues to support that budget, the recommended course of action would be to approve the decision unit adding the TANF revenues in the Child Assistance and Development budget, however, as a direct allocation and not as a transfer, and then a series of companion decision units I'll be discussing when we get to the Welfare Field Services and the Welfare Administration budgets. So the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to not recommend approval of this decision unit to reduce TANF block grant revenues and TANF cash assistance authority by $10 million in each year of the biennium due to the erroneous construction of the decision unit in the governor's recommended budget?
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to not recommend the approval of this decision as further read by staff.
Thank you. And a second? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving along.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Colby Nichols for the record. There are no other closing items associated with this account. Given that we have some time yet, I'm happy to move on to Welfare Field Services.
Yes, let's move on to Welfare Field Services.
Fantastic. Okay, so Welfare Field Services, that begins on page 27 of your closing packet. There's only one major issue that's associated with this account. That's a revision to the caseload decision unit as well as Budget Amendment A231893233. The Governor is recommending the elimination of 43 positions and associated costs, resulting in a corresponding reduction of funding totaling $2.5 million in fiscal year 24, of which $291,218 is general fund, and $3.2 million in fiscal year 25, of which $396,817 is general fund. That would be to align staffing in this budget with projected changes in the division's caseloads. However, as with the other budgets, the agency submits updated caseload information for this account, and here in Welfare Field Services, that contributes to staffing changes. However, in discussing with the agency and consistent with the memorandum submitted by the agency to the Governor's Finance Office, they believe they can handle any increase in workload by filling the vacancies in their positions as currently authorized and have requested to withdraw this decision unit. In order to effectuate that, the Governor's Finance Office transmitted Budget Amendment A231893233 on March 7, 2023. That budget amendment effectively removes this decision unit from this budget and results in the restoration of revenues totaling $2.5 million in fiscal year 24 and $3.2 million in fiscal year 25, as well as those 43 positions. Again, believing that they can address any increase in workload by filling vacancies out of currently authorized positions and transitioning positions that are currently in training to full workload capability. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of that budget amendment A231893233 to eliminate the decision unit M201, which would restore those revenues of $2.5 million in fiscal year 24, of which $291,218 are general fund and $3.2 million in fiscal year 25, of which $396,817 are general fund, as well as those 43 positions, including 37 administrative assistants, 3 family services specialists, 3 family services supervisor positions.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move as recommended by staff and read by staff.
A second? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 2 budgets remaining that have been previously heard by the committee. Honestly, fairly unlikely that I'll be able to get through either of them prior to, but happy to take a stab.
Let's take a stab.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I apologize for that. They're actually going back to the Welfare Field Services, the other closing items list. That's on page 30 of your packet. There are 3 other closing items, the first of which is a change in the administrative cost allocation that's related to that allocation of TANF grant funding for the Child Assistance and Development budget, which I've discussed previously. We would consider we would recommend closing that other closing item consistent with the subcommittee's decision regarding that companion decision unit E900 in the Child Assistance and Development budget. And then other closing items 2 and 3 be closed as recommended by the governor. And finally, fiscal staff would request authority to make technical adjustments as needed.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
A second? Second. Any discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Let's move on. Never mind. I think we're going to take a recess now so that the assembly can go and get some pictures taken, and hopefully we will be back very shortly. So thank you very much, and we're in recess. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience. We are going to get started again, and we'll go back to the administration budget 3228.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, this is Colby Nichols. I'm a program analyst with LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. As you indicated, we're going to be moving to the Welfare Administration budget. This is beginning on page 3 of your closing packet. There are 8 major closing issues associated with this account, the first of which is caseload changes in Budget Amendment A231793228. Governor's recommending total funding of $3 million in fiscal year '24, of which $1.1 million would be general fund, and $3.8 million in fiscal year '25, $1.4 million of which would be general fund. That's for 34 new positions and associated costs to align staffing in this budget with projected changes in the caseloads. Similar to what we've discussed for the welfare field services, following the budget hearing and in reviewing some communication between the agency and the governor's finance office, it appears that the positions that are included in this decision unit should be considered duplicative of those in other enhancements, and therefore the governor's finance office has transmitted budget amendment A231793228 on March 7, 2023, again effectively eliminating this decision unit from the budget. Resulting in expenditure reductions of $3 million in fiscal year '24, $1.1 million general fund, and $3.8 million in fiscal year '25, $1.4 million of general fund. So the decision for the subcommittee regarding this is whether the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of that budget amendment, that's A231793228, to eliminate the M201 decision unit, which was recommended by the governor to fund 34 new positions in this budget based upon those projected changes in the caseloads. Elimination of that decision unit M201 would result in budget reductions of $3 million in fiscal year '24, of which $1.1 million would be general fund, and $3.8 million in fiscal year '25, $1.4 million of which would be general fund.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
And a second? Okay, I have a first from Senator Nguyen and a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you again, Colby Nichols, for the record. Moving on to the second major closing issue, which begins towards the bottom of page 4 of your packet. That's 1 full-time IT position and 1 contract IT position for security compliance. Governor's recommending total funding of $257,584 in fiscal year '24, of which $105,070 is general fund, $117,060 in fiscal year '25, of which $47,392 is general fund. These are for costs associated with 1 IT professional 2 position, as well as costs for 1 contracted IT programmer position to support the division's IT security compliance activities. Regarding the discrepancy between fiscal year '24 and '25, this recommendation is including $166,400 in fiscal year '24 only. That's for the contracted IT programmer position. This position would be implementing the LogicPath security compliance software platform. During the budget hearing, the agency asked, or the subcommittees asked the agency to provide more information, whether the division would be able to comply with federal and state security standards if this recommendation were approved, and whether they were currently out of compliance with any such standards. And in response, the agency clarified that it's not currently out of compliance. The intent is to increase their ability to fulfill these requirements as they expand and grow in the future. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of total funding of $257,584 in fiscal year '24, again, of which $105,070 is general fund, $117,060 in fiscal year '25, of which $47,392 is general fund. Those are for costs associated with the 1 new IT professional 2 position, as well as that 1 contracted IT programmer position to support the division's IT security compliance activities as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Committee, do we have any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
And a second? Okay, I have a first from Senator Nguyen and a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Colby Nichols for the record. The third major closing issue, discussion of which begins at the top of page 6 of your packet. That's 7 new full-time positions for the Fiscal Administration Unit. Governor's recommending total funding of $551,566 in fiscal year '24, of which $224,700 dollars general fund and $706,520 in fiscal year 25, of which $285,839 is general fund. That would be for 7 new full-time positions and those associated costs for the fiscal administration unit. There's a table towards the bottom of page 6 that summarizes the positions included in this recommendation as well as their duties. This is to address an increase in workload that's associated with an increase in funding, as well as the number of subawards and partners that the agency is working with. Again, an increase in federal reporting requirements as well as a factor. Similar to as discussed previously during the budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired whether the division was currently out of compliance with any such federal reporting requirements. And again, the agency testified it's not currently out of compliance, and that the intent of the recommendation is to allow them to remain in compliance as those requirements and the scopes of the programs, fundings, and the standards from federal partners are expanded. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval. Total funding of $551,566 in fiscal year 24, again, $224.07 of which is general fund. $706,520 in fiscal year 25, of which $285,839 is general fund. That's for 7 new full-time positions and associated costs for the division's fiscal administration unit as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
And a second? Second. Okay, I have a first from Senator Wynn, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. All right, motion carries.
Again, Colby Nichols for the record. Moving on to major closing issue 4, that begins towards the middle of page 7 of your packet. This is an additional 7 new full-time positions, this time for IT strategic planning and oversight. Governor's recommending total funding of $671,458 in fiscal year 24, of which $143,738 is general fund. And for fiscal year 25, the total funding is $821,049, of which $154,480 is general fund. This is for 7 new positions and associated costs to improve the agency's capacity for IT strategic planning and oversight. Again, there's a table this time at the top of page 8 that's summarizing the positions included in this decision unit as well as their duties. During the budget hearing, the subcommittee asked the agency to provide an overview of its IT-related project portfolio, specifically any projects that might be delayed or on hold due to a lack of staffing resources. And in response, the agency testified to have 45 projects that are currently in that project portfolio. However, following the hearing, they provided an updated IT project portfolio indicating they have 43 projects, of which 16 are waiting to start, 19 of which are actively underway, and 8 projects that are on hold due to resource availability issues. Based on that updated portfolio, the projects that are currently on hold are related to accessibility improvements for the division's website, various changes related to aid codes, updates to reporting capabilities, and various other projects. In addition, the agency testified that the new NV-KID system modernization project, which we'll be discussing as a major issue shortly, as well as some of the other system modernization projects, are contributing the need for additional staff for IT strategic planning and oversight. Subcommittee finally inquired whether the agency would be able to fill these positions in a timely manner given the state's issues with recruiting and retaining qualified IT personnel, and the agency responded does not anticipate significant issues in filling these positions. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of total funding $671,458 in fiscal year 24, of which $143,738 is general fund and $821,049 in fiscal year 25, of which $154,480 is general fund. That's for 7 new positions and associated costs to improve the agency's capacity for IT strategic planning and oversight as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
And a second?
Second.
I have a first from Senator Wynn, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you again, Colby Nichols for the record. Major closing issue number 5 begins on page 9 of your packet. This is a new Deputy Division Administrator position. The Governor's recommending total funding of $136,422 in fiscal year 24. Of that, $55,393 is general fund and $172,364 in fiscal year 25, of which $69,251 is general funds. That's for one new unclassified deputy division administrator position and the associated costs. The division currently has a division administrator as well as two existing deputy division administrator positions. During the subcommittee hearing, what was communicated is this recommended new position would serve as the primary provider of oversight for the IT, human resources, fiscal management functions. Under the current staffing model, these duties are shuffled between the existing senior staff, and the agency has indicated that the intent of this request is to provide a dedicated person who can maybe get some experience, long-term experience operating those functions, and allow the agency to be more proactive in addressing any issues as opposed to reacting to issues after they occur. So the decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of total funding of $136,422 in fiscal year 2024, of which $55,393 is general fund, and $172,364 in fiscal year 25, of which $69,251 is general fund. That's for one new unclassified deputy division administrator position and the associated costs as recommended by the governor.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. I've got a first from Senator Wynn and a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to major issue number 6. This is 18 new full-time IT positions as well as 7 contract positions to support the NV Kids system. Governor's recommending total funding of $3.2 million, of which $1.1 million is general fund in fiscal year 24, and $3.7 million, of which $1.3 million is general fund in fiscal year 25 for 18 new IT positions, as well as costs for 7 contracted IT positions to support and maintain the Child Support Enforcement Program's new information system, which is known as NV Kids. The non-general fund portion of this recommendation is funded through federal Child Support Enforcement Program grant revenues. There's a table at the top of page 11, again summarizing the positions that are involved in this recommendation. Those are the state positions, and then as I've mentioned, there's also 7 contracted IT positions. As the NV Kids system goes live and is fully implemented, the intent of this recommendation is to provide the agency sufficient staff to take on the ongoing operations and maintenance duties for that system. Regarding the contracted staff, these are there to provide 24-hour support and monitoring of the system, including nights and weekends. There was some discussion during the subcommittee. There's also a one-time appropriation and authorization being recommended to the Child Support Enforcement Program, also for the NV Kids system. In reviewing this, it was unclear whether this recommendation as well as that one-time appropriation authorization should be considered as contingent upon each other. And during the budget hearing, the agency confirmed that approval of these positions should be contingent upon the approval of the governor's recommended one-time appropriation and authorization totaling $48.3 million, of which $16.4 million is general fund for NV Kids. Therefore, if the subcommittee wishes to approve this recommendation, the approval would be contingent upon the approval of the governor's recommended one-time appropriation and authorization for NV Kids to the Child Support Enforcement Program budget. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for $3.2 million, of which $1.1 million is general fund in fiscal year 24, and $3.7 million, of which $1.3 million is general fund in fiscal year 25 for 18 new IT positions, as well as the costs for 7 contract IT positions to support and maintain the Child Support Enforcement Program's new information system known as NV Kids, contingent upon the passage and approval of the recommended one-time appropriation authorization of $48.3 million, of which $16.4 million is general fund, to the Child Support Enforcement Program's budget.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Senator Wynn?
And I just want to clarify, that hasn't been proposed yet, that one-time appropriation. And so this would be contingent on them ultimately bringing that appropriation. Is that correct?
Yes, Colby Nichols for the record. Your interpretation is correct, yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move to move the recommendation as read by staff.
And second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Wynn and a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Colby Nichols for the record. Moving on to major closing issue 7. This is contract costs for the Nomad System Modernization Project, discussion of which begins towards the bottom of page 12 of your packet. Governor recommends American Rescue Plan Act system replacement reserve reductions of $2.9 million in fiscal year '24 and $17.3 million in fiscal year '25 for hardware and software contract costs, as well as contracted IT programmer costs. These are associated with the modernization of the agency's mainframe for case management and eligibility, which is known as NOMADS. This project was initially approved by the Interim Finance Committee at its October 20th, 2022 meeting. However, in approving that, the IFC directed the agency to place all future years' funding into a special use reserve category and to request that funding for the modernization project through an enhancement in the governor's recommended budget for the 23-25 biennium. And that's exactly what we're doing here. There is a table towards the top of page 13 providing an overview of the various phases of the project, the timeline, and the costs associated with each. During the budget hearing, the agency confirmed that this timeline and the project estimates are still accurate. This is the information that was provided at that IFC meeting. However, they have confirmed that this is still accurate. In response to questions regarding how far along the contracting process was, the agency testified that a contract amendment was executed authorizing the vendor to begin that modernization within 2 days of the funding being approved at that October IFC meeting. The agency testified does not anticipate any issues in completing the project under the projected timeline that has been presented on the previous page, and indicated that the existing system at the time of its development was anticipated to handle approximately 50,000 cases, whereas the system now is required to store data related to over 1 million cases. So the decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of ARPA system replacement reserve reductions $2.9 million fiscal year '24 and $17.3 million fiscal year '25 for hardware and software contract costs, as well as contract IT programmer costs that are associated with the modernization of the agency's mainframe for case management and eligibility, known as NOMADS, as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
Second?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries. Please continue.
Thank you again, Colby Nichols, for the record. Moving on to the eighth major closing issue. These are contract costs for the Access Nevada system modernization. Discussion of that begins towards the middle of page 14 of your packet. Governor recommends ARPA system modernization reserve reductions of $4.6 million in fiscal year '24 and $3 million in fiscal year '25. This is for contract costs associated with the agency's modernization of its client-facing web portal, which is known as Access Nevada. Similar to as what was discussed for NOMADS, this is a project that was previously approved by the Interim Finance Committee at its October 2022 meeting, and a similar setup regarding placing the funding into a reserve and requesting that funding for the forthcoming biennium via an enhancement. Access Nevada is the agency's client-facing web portal. The intent of the modernization is to transition it to a modern cloud-based platform, as well as allow the agency to populate applications for the various programs and only have the clients really enter their information one time and then transfer that information, with potential to maybe scale that functionality to other divisions of the Department of Health and Human Services or local or other community partners as well. During the budget hearing, the subcommittee asked the agency for a status update on the Access Nevada modernization, and in response, the agency testified that as this serves as the central application portal for the agency's client, again, the intent is to allow applicants to submit a single application. The agency indicated it's currently working with a selected vendor to develop a detailed scope of work for this project, and once that is completed, the agency anticipates submitting a contract amendment authorizing the vendor to begin that work to the Board of Examiners. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of ARPA system modernization reserve reductions, $4.6 million fiscal year '24 and $3 million fiscal year '25 for contract costs associated with the agency's modernization of its client-facing web portal, which is known as Access Nevada, as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move to approve the recommendation as read by staff.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Yeah, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to page 16 of the closing packet, there are three other closing items that are associated with this account. Other closing items 1 and 3, I would just briefly note, other closing item 3 is back language intended for the 2023 Appropriations Act. We would recommend those be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 2 is related to that change to administrative cost allocations regarding the allocation of TANF funding to the Child Assistance and Development budget, which we'll be discussing shortly. We would recommend that other closing item 2 be closed contingent upon approval of the companion decision units in the Child Assistance and Development budget, as well as in the Welfare Field Services budget. And finally, fiscal staff would request authority to make further technical adjustments to this budget as needed.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
And a second?
Second?
Okay, I have a motion from a Senator Wynn and a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, moving a little bit out of order, we'll be going to the Child Assistance and Development budget, which begins on page 33 of your closing packet. There are 5 major closing issues associated with this account, the first of which is caseload changes, discussion of which begins on page 34 of your packet. Governor's recommending a combined increase of federal funds totaling $8.1 million in fiscal year 24 and $8.8 million in fiscal year 25. That would be to align funding with projected caseloads for the Child Assistance and Development budget. Again, as we've discussed for the TANF budget, the agency provides updated caseload projections in March 2023, includes some additional months of data for fiscal year 23, as well as updated projections. You can see the summary of the caseload changes. That's going to be in the first table on page 35 of your packet. Based on that updated caseload projection, they're projecting the fiscal year 23 total average monthly caseloads to increase about 18.9% compared to fiscal year 22 actual average caseloads, and then anticipate average monthly caseloads to increase about 5.4% when compared to those updated FY23 caseloads in fiscal year 24, and then an additional 2.4% increase over the projected fiscal year 24. The net impact of the updated caseload projections is summarized in the second table. That's close to the bottom of page 35 of your packet. The net impact of that caseload update is a decrease in federal Child Care and Development Fund block grant revenues totaling $1.8 million in fiscal year 24 and $631,199 in fiscal year 25 when you compare those amounts to those that are included in the executive budget. During the budget hearing, there was some testimony provided regarding the average costs of child care. In responding to those questions, the agency erroneously identified monthly costs of child care as weekly. This was corrected via a memo that was distributed to members of this committee after the hearing. However, you'll see a bulleted list towards the middle of page 36. Those are the correct and updated average costs of child care for the subcommittee's information. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of decreasing total Child Care and Development Fund grant revenues by $1.8 million in fiscal year 24, $631,199 in fiscal year 25, again to align the funding in the M200 and the M201 decision units with those March 2023 updated caseload projections.
Thank you very much, and I will say that's still a lot of money for daycare. So, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
Okay, second.
A second?
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Wynn, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries.
Moving on to the second major closing issue, that's 9 new positions to support the Child Care Service Centers, discussion of which begins about halfway down on page 36 of your packet. The governor is recommending federal Child Care and Development Fund block grant funds of $1.1 million fiscal year 24, $1.2 million fiscal year 25 for 9 new permanent state positions and associated costs for the Child Care Service Centers, also known as the Child Care Hubs. There's a table on page 37 summarizing the positions included in this recommendation as well as their duties. The agency has indicated they may need to adjust the number of positions that are included in this recommendation, as 2 of the positions are intended to provide sort of broader statewide programmatic support as opposed to being dedicated to the Child Care Service Center hubs. However, this is also related to the next major closing issue, as that requested adjustment would ultimately be budget neutral to both this decision unit and the next major issue. We would only recommend that technical adjustment to move those positions from this recommendation and add them to those included in major issue number 3. Should the subcommittee recommend approval of only one of those 2 decision units, Should the subcommittee recommend approval of both decision units, no adjustment would be needed as the net number of positions would not change. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of Federal Child Care and Development Fund block grants of $1.1 million fiscal year 24 and $1.2 million fiscal year 25 for 9 new permanent state positions and associated costs for the agency's child care service centers as recommended by the governor?
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
Second?
Second.
Yeah, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colby Nichols for the record. Again, moving on to major closing issue 3. This is 5 new positions to improve strategic planning and oversight. The governor is recommending federal grant funds of $419,852 fiscal year 24, $537,463 fiscal year 25. That's for the personnel and associated operating costs for 5 new positions to improve the agency's strategic planning and programmatic oversight. Again, there's a table this time on page 39 summarizing the positions involved in this recommendation as well as their duties. As I previously mentioned, the agency did indicate they may need a technical adjustment. However, the same line of thought regarding it being budget neutral and only really recommending that adjustment if only one of the 2 decision units were to move forward also applies to this decision unit as well. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of federal grant funds of $419,852 in fiscal year 24 and $537,463 in fiscal year 25 for the personnel and associated operating costs of 5 new positions to improve the agency's strategic planning and programmatic oversight capabilities as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
A second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Again, Colby Nichols for the record. Moving on to major issue number 4, the child care case management system modernization. The governor is recommending a combination of federal child care and development fund block grant funds of $2.3 million, as well as federal child care mandatory matching grant funds $755,000 in each year. That's a total of $3 million in each year of the 23-25 biennium for contract costs associated with the agency's child care case management system modernization project. That project was initially approved by the 2021 legislature. And the funding here would allow the agency to continue that project. During the budget hearing, the subcommittee asked the agency to confirm whether it's confident it would be able to implement this system by March 31st, 2025, given several delays that arose due to the pandemic and some other issues. However, the agency responded affirmatively and testified that despite the delays, the agency's partners at Children's Cabinet have already contracted to begin this project that's funded through subawards through the agency. And the agency intends to utilize a contract joinder to add the agency to this contract, intending to use a customized off-the-shelf system for the modernization, which would reduce the time needed to complete the project. Again, they remain confident that they'd be able to complete it by that target date of March 31st, 2025. The decision for the subcommittee is whether they wish to recommend approval of a combination of federal child care and development fund block grant funds, of which $2.3 million, and then federal child care mandatory matching grant funds $755,000, getting to a total of $3 million in each year of the 23-25 biennium for contract costs that are associated with the agency's child care case management system modernization project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
A second.
Yeah, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you again, Colby Nichols, for the record. Moving on to major closing issue number 5, discussion of which begins towards the bottom of page 41 of your packet. This is increased TANF funds for child care subsidies. The governor is recommending an increase of $10 million in federal temporary assistance for needy families or TANF funds in each year of the 23-25 biennium to fund an increased child care subsidies for the TANF New Employees of Nevada program. And then due to changes in the agency's administrative cost allocation, this recommended increase in TANF funds would also require additional general fund appropriations totaling $1.5 million in each year of the biennium to the Welfare Administration and Welfare Field Services budgets. During the budget hearing, this was originally discussed as a major issue in the TANF budget account. However, as previously discussed, in working through this with the agency, the Governor's Finance Office, this isn't necessarily a transfer of TANF block grant funding. It is an increase in the allocation of TANF funding to this account. During the budget hearing, there were some questions on how this would actually impact the caseload as far as additional numbers of children served or change the benefit amounts. And following the budget hearing, the agency provided a breakdown of how that $10 million would be utilized. Approximately 5% of it would be used for admin costs for the agency itself. $1.2 million would be used for quality rating and improvement activities, such as subgrants to the Nevada Department of Education. And the remaining $8.3 million, or 83%, would be used to fund child care subsidies for the new employees of Nevada population as well as the at-risk population. And following the budget hearing, they indicated that that $8.3 million would be able to support additional approximately 1,100 children through the NEON and at-risk caseloads, with priority being given to those on the new employees of Nevada caseload. As I've discussed, there are 2 additional companion decision units. That's within the Welfare Administration and Field Services budget. That's to address changes that this recommended allocation of TANF block grant funds would have on the administrative cost allocations in those budgets. The total of that $1.5 million, $216,693 would be going to the administration budget, with the remaining $1.3 million going to Welfare Field Services. That's for each year of the 23-25 biennium. So as discussed in the closing document for the TANF budget account, this decision unit was incorrectly referenced as a transfer of TANF grant funding. Again, just to be perfectly clear, this is a direct allocation of TANF grant revenues to this budget to support those activities mentioned previously. If the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of the additional TANF grant revenue to support this budget, the recommended course of action would be approve this decision unit as a direct allocation, as well as those companion decision units in the Welfare Administration and Welfare Field Services budget, which add the general fund appropriations to address the impact the recommended funding change would have on the agency's administrative cost allocations. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation to increase TANF block grant funding in this budget by $10 million in each year of the 23-25 biennium to increase child care subsidies for the TANF New Employees of Nevada program, which would also require combined total general fund appropriations of $1.5 million in fiscal year 24, as well as $1.5 million in fiscal year 25, to the administration and welfare field services budgets to address those changes in administrative cost allocations?
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
Second.
Okay, I have a first from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on.
Great. Thank you again, Colby Nichols, for the record. There's one other closing item associated with this account that's on the table towards the middle of page 43. Fiscal staff would recommend that other closing item be closed as recommended by the governor and request authority to make other technical adjustments to this budget as necessary.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion?
I'd so move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Colby Nichols for the record. That concludes the portion of the agenda for welfare budgets that were previously heard. The remaining 4 budgets are staff closures, consistent with the approach that we've taken for the others. I'll briefly move through each of the staff closed budgets, provide a brief summary, and pause for questions. However, the motions to close the staff closed budgets will be done as a batch towards the end of the presentation. So starting with the first staff closed budget, that would be assistance to the aged and blind, which begins on page 47 of your packet. The Assistance to the Aged and Blind program provides supplemental income to low-income aged and blind individuals. This is essentially a state-funded supplemental payment to the SSI. The division contracts with the SSA to determine eligibility and to issue that state supplement. There are no major closing issues associated with this account. There is one other closing item. This is similar to the approach used for the other caseload-driven budget. This is the caseload updates. So again, you'll see a table towards the bottom of page 47 showing the difference between the projections as included in the governor's recommended budget, as well as those included in the March caseload update. As far as the impact for funding, that would be in the table that's on page 48. And as I said before, closing recommendations for this budget would be included in the summary page on the closing packet.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next budget.
Okay. The second staff closed budget would be the Child Support Enforcement Program, discussion of which begins on page 51 of your packet. This is another staff closed budget. The Child Support Enforcement Program is responsible for several services such as the location of absent parents, the establishment of parentage, the establishment of child support orders, collection of support payments, and enforcement of private medical insurance. Again, there are no major closing issues associated with this account. There are two other closing items that are summarized in the table towards the bottom. Closing recommendations will again be included in the summary page. And finally, I just briefly note under additional information, you'll see some information about a one-time general fund appropriation authorization. This is for the NV Kids system, as we've discussed. This should be viewed as contingent as, with that decision unit in the administration budget for some additional IT positions. And that concludes my presentation for this budget.
Thank you very much. Moving on to 3239.
That's right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Colby Nichols for the record. The next budget is child support federal reimbursement, discussion of which begins on page 53 of your closing packet. There are no major closing issues or other closing items associated with this account.
Thank you very much. And next, 4862.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The final staff closed budget is the Energy Assistance Program budget, discussion of which begins on page 55 of your packet. There are no major closing issues associated with this account. However, there is a caseload update that's discussed under other items. You'll see, again, two tables on page 56, the first of which towards the middle is going to show the difference in average monthly households as well as the difference in average annual payments. And then regarding the changes in funding, that would be summarized in the second table that's closer to the bottom. I would just briefly note that due to a discrepancy between the fiscal year 22 actual expenditures for Energy Assistance Program as well as the amounts included in the base budget, fiscal staff is recommending some technical adjustments that are reflected in that table below. That would be to align funding in the base budget with fiscal year 22 actual expenditures, and then to make further adjustments to align the funding and expenditures to reflect those caseload changes that were included in the March 2023 caseload update. The net result of the technical adjustments as referenced in that table is a reduction of $3.9 million each year of the biennium. That's to align funding in the budget with fiscal year 22 actual expenditures in the base. And then the addition of $4.2 million in each year of the biennium to align the fiscal year 22 actual amounts with updated fiscal year 23 projections. That's the M200 decision unit. And then finally, the addition of $5.4 million in fiscal year 24, $13.1 million in fiscal year 25 to align the budget with projections for the forthcoming biennium. That's the M201. Due to that discrepancy, when you're looking at the base row of that table, that's why you're seeing different amounts being reflected. That concludes the summary of the technical adjustments, and again, closing recommendations would be included in the summary page.
Okay, thank you very much.
Moving on to the summary page, that's on page 59 of your packet. Fiscal staff would recommend that the following budgets be closed as recommended by the governor with those technical adjustments noted, and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as needed. That includes the welfare assistance to the aged and blind budget, including those technical adjustments noted for the other closing item to align the budget with the March 2023 updated caseloads, the child support enforcement program budget, the child support federal reimbursement budget, and then finally the energy assistance program budget, including those technical adjustments noted to align base budget expenditures with actual fiscal year 22 expenditures, as well as align the budget with the March 2023 updated caseloads.
Thank you very much. Committee, do we have any questions on these four budgets? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'd so move to approve the recommendations as read by staff.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the portion of the agenda dedicated to welfare and supportive services. Thank you for your time this morning.
thank you, and we will be changing of the guard real quick, so please give just a quick moment. Thank you very much. We'll bring it back together, and we will be starting with the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation, also known as DETR. And Ms. Morris, you can begin when ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nancy Morris, Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record. Beginning on page 61 of the closing packet is the first of the 16 DETR budgets, 6 of which were heard in the subcommittees and 10 are considered staff closed. The first budget is the Commission on Post-Secondary Education, budget account 2666. The Commission sets policy, adopts regulations, and grants licenses to operate private post-secondary institutions, and also contracts annually with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to review, approve, and provide oversight of public and private schools that train veterans. There is one major closing issue in this budget. The executive budget recommends general fund appropriations of $55,299 and federal funds of $55,299 over the 23-25 biennium for one new compliance audit investigator position. The position would conduct on-site institutional audits to ensure compliance with statutes and federal VA requirements, review advertising materials and websites of licensed post-secondary institutions, and participate in the investigation and resolution of student complaints concerning licensed institutions. The agency indicates this position would also address the new approvals required for VA education benefits and the full reapprovals required of institutions every 24 months at a minimum. The agency's funding from the VA is based on its performance rating and meeting certain performance standards, and the agency indicates the addition of the recommended new position would help ensure that the agency maintains its high rating. Towards the bottom of page 62 is a recommended technical adjustment to include travel and computer equipment expenditures in this decision unit. The decision for the subcommittee at the top of page 63, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation to add one new compliance audit investigator position funded with general fund appropriations of $55,299 and federal funds of $59,063 over the 23-25 biennium with the noted technical adjustment?
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on.
There are four other closing items for this budget on page 63. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 4 be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries. Moving on.
The next budget begins on page 65, the vocational rehabilitation budget, budget account 3265, which provides rehabilitation services to eligible individuals with disabilities to assist them in preparing for and obtaining meaningful employment and self-sufficiency. There are 3 major closing issues in this budget. The first one is 3 new transition coordinator positions. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $65,143 and federal Section 110 grant funds of $240,687 over the 23-25 biennium for the 3 new program officer positions, which would serve as transition coordinator positions and provide pre-employment transition services, or PREETs, to high school students with disabilities. These services are provided to students ages 14 to 22 to assist with the transition from high school to competitive integrated employment. And the agency currently utilizes part-time contract positions to provide this services, which do not enhance the building of relationships with school districts and students. The agency indicates the recommended positions would provide consistency and create trusted relationships to ensure that the services are delivered in a professional, accurate, and timely manner. And with the recommendation for the 3 new positions, it would eliminate contract positions, which would decrease contract expenditures in the 23-25 biennium. During the subcommittee hearing on March 7th, the agency testified it had increased outreach efforts to improve awareness of the available pre-ed services, including media campaigns, posters, and meetings with educators to proactively build relationships with schools. The decision for the subcommittee at the top of page 67. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approving the governor's recommendation for 3 new program officer positions funded with general fund appropriations of $65,143 and federal Section 110 grant funds of $240,687 over the 23-25 biennium?
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on to number 2.
The second major closing item in this budget is 2 new workforce service representative positions. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $60,832 and federal Section 110 grant funds of $224,760 over the 23-25 biennium for 2 new workforce service representative positions, which would coordinate internal job placement and job development efforts for vocational rehabilitation clients. These positions would coordinate internal job placement with regional partners and other vocational rehabilitation staff and identify employment opportunities and prepare clients for competitive integrated employment. The agency has 3 workforce service representatives currently, 1 in Reno and 2 in Las Vegas, and does utilize contract positions and expects to continue to need to utilize contract positions in cases of specialized needs or when client demand exceeds what the agency can provide. The agency indicates one of the new positions would serve northern Nevada and rural areas, and the other position would serve Clark and Nye counties. The decision for the subcommittee at the top of page 68. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approving the governor's recommendation for 2 new workforce services representative positions funded with general fund appropriations of $60,832 and federal Section 110 grant funds of $224,760 over the 23-25 biennium?
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to number 3.
The third item on page 68, the governor recommends federal Social Security Administration funds of $433,124 over the 23-25 biennium for contract services to create a new Disability Benefits 101 website, which would assist people with disabilities in making informed decisions regarding competitive integrated employment and provide information on other benefits and healthcare programs. The new website, which would be available in English, is expected to be live by the beginning of fiscal year 2025 if approved by the legislature. And one note towards the bottom of page 68 is the governor also recommends federal Social Security Administration funds in the Bureau of Services of the Blind or visually impaired budget to fund 10% of the total anticipated expenditures for the endeavor to launch the new Disability Benefits 101 website. The decision for the subcommittee at the top of page 69. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approving the governor's recommendation for federal Social Security Administration funds of $433,124 over the 2023-25 biennium for a new disability benefits website?
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Perfect, moving on.
There are 4 other closing items for this budget on page 69. The 4th item is pertains to a budget amendment A230743265 submitted by the Governor's Finance Office, which would then, if approved, reduce the amount indicated in the 2023 one-time appropriation noted at the bottom of page 69. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 3 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing item 4 be closed as recommended in budget amendment A230743265, and requests authority for fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on to the next budget.
On page 71 of the packet is the Dieter Administration Budget Account 3272, which provides leadership, direction, and support for the department, and is primarily funded by cost allocation reimbursements. There is one major closing issue in this budget. The governor recommends cost allocation reimbursement revenue of $186,895 over the 23-25 biennium for 1 new management analyst position and associated operating and equipment expenditures to improve the department's grant management. The agency currently has 1 grants and projects analyst position that manages all the grants and reporting for the department, as shown on the table on the top of page 72, with the history and projected grant and reports each year. And other financial management staff at Dieter have been stepping in to help address the workload. The new position would help improve coordination between the financial management and the program areas and supervise the existing grants and projects analyst position. Technical adjustment is noted to include the business productivity suite license expenditures in this decision unit. The decision for the subcommittee at the bottom of page 72. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for 1 new management analyst position funded with cost allocation reimbursement revenue of $186,895 over the 2023-25 biennium with the noted technical adjustment?
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on.
There is one other closing item on page 73. Fiscal staff recommends other closing item 1 be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries, and we're moving on to Budget 4771.
Thank you. Nancy Morris, Fiscal Analysis Division. On page 75 is the Employment Security Special Fund Budget Account 4771, which serves as, includes revenue that are penalties and interest collected from employers for late or non-payment of unemployment taxes. There are 2 major closing issues in this budget. The first begins on page 75, which is continued funding for intermittent positions. The governor recommends penalties and interest revenues of $8.3 million over the 23-25 biennium to continue funding 60 existing intermittent positions in the unemployment insurance budget to address the backlog in processing unemployment benefit claims. The agency was approved for the intermittents in the 2021 legislature, as well as through a work program approved at the June 21, 2022 IFC meeting to utilize Federal American Rescue Plan Act funds of $8.8 million to continue some of the intermittent positions in fiscal '23, and the governor's recommendation would continue 60 of those positions through fiscal year 2025. The positions are shown in a table on page 76. The governor's recommendation includes an increase in penalties and interest revenue to fund the positions in the unemployment insurance budget. Generally, budgets with reserves decisions in budgets with reserves should be funded with reserves, and the agency and governor's finance office concurred that instead of an increase in penalties and interest revenue to support this decision unit, it also should be funded with reserves. During the hearing on March 7th, the agency indicated it had backlogs of 13,486 claims awaiting adjudication and 33,000 claims in appeals that it expected to be resolved by the end of calendar year 2023. Subsequent to the hearing, the agency and governor's finance office concurred that it would be more appropriate to budget for the intermittent positions only in fiscal year 2024. And if the agency needed positions beyond fiscal year 2024, it could submit work program revisions to continue the positions. So the subcommittee's decisions on page 77. The options for the subcommittee, option A is to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for $8.3 million over the 2023-25 biennium to continue funding the 60 intermittent positions in the unemployment insurance budget in fiscal year 2024 and 2025, including a technical adjustment to eliminate penalties and interest revenue and instead fund decision unit E225 with reserves. Or option B, recommend approval for $3.6 million to continue funding 60 intermittent positions in the unemployment insurance budget through fiscal year 2024, eliminate penalties and interest revenue, and instead fund decision unit E225 with reserves.
Thank you very much. Any comments?
I just want to clarify, with these additional 60 intermittent positions, it's my understanding that the agency believes that they will be able to make up that backlog by the end of fiscal year 2024. Is that correct?
That is for the backlogs of the adjudication and appeals claims. However, the agency did caution that it is unknown what else might happen claims-wise.
But as far as the backlog, that's what this would potentially address.
Correct. And that would be the communicated timeline of completing those backlogs by the end of calendar year 2023.
Thank you.
Senator Titus?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It just seems that that's an incredible amount of appeals and adjudications, 47,000 folks. And I'm just wondering, admittedly, it was COVID, it was unprecedented, and so there was a large number, but I'm looking at a perspective and like a percent. Was that a traditional, is there usually that percent of folks in this process that appeal these claims? It seems just unfathomable to me that 47,000 folks had to appeal or adjudicate their claims.
Fiscal staff does not have the historical data, but there are theater people in the audience.
Yes, we have members from Dieter, so please come enlighten us.
Good morning. For the record, Christopher Sewell. I'm the director of the Department of Employment Training. Boy, it's been a long evening last night and long morning this morning. Dieter, 47,000 is unusual. And as I testified earlier, we're going through the backlog. It's still there. But I can also tell you that, and I'll give you some new numbers. I was planning on doing that at the end of the hearing, but might as well do that now. Our adjudication backlog started testified at the end of January, early February, we were around 16,000 in backlog of adjudication. And I said 6 months. We're going to make it. We're down to about a little under 9,000, 8,997. We're going to make the 6 months on for adjudication. I wanted to do it by today. Didn't quite get there. We had a little bit of an increase in claims and some people on vacation because of spring breaks and things of that nature. But we will get done within the 6 months. Our oldest, or what we call a DTEC date for adjudication, is March 9th. When I testified in January, that was still back in December. So it will get done. Our appeals backlog, that is something that I am working on diligently. It's still around 31,800. It's gone down a little. But at the last BOE meeting, we were given permission to hire a third-party contractor. And that is just getting up and running. And I am extremely confident that we will get done by the end of the year, if not sooner.
Follow up on that, if I might, Madam Chair. So thank you for that. And yes, I remember the hearing. My question really was, and I know it was just a sudden huge amount, but from the historical perspective, the traditional claims, what percent do you usually end up having adjudicated?
Troy Jordan, Deputy Director of DETR, for the record. Traditionally, one of the numbers we looked at was that 2% of all denials became petitions for judicial review. That number is closer to 20% of pandemic claims.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your answers. I will entertain a motion now.
I would so move to recommend the approval for $3.6 million to continue funding 60 intermittent positions in the unemployment insurance budget through fiscal year 2024, and also eliminate penalties and interest revenue and instead fund Decision Unit E225 with reserves.
And I will second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Wynn, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll move on.
The second major closing item in this budget begins at the bottom of page 17, which is the budgeting of coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds. The executive budget recommends transfers of $32.6 million in federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds to be placed in ARPA reserves in each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium for the Unemployment Insurance Information System Modernization Project. The 2021 legislature, through the passage of Assembly Bill 484, authorized the recovery funds of $54.0 million for the Unemployment Insurance Information System Modernization and work programs totaling $21.4 million have been approved to authorize expenditures, leaving the $32.6 million in available funds. The agency has had issued an RFP and selected a vendor and entered into a contract with Fast Enterprises to complete the system modernization. The first phase is anticipated to be completed in February of 2024, and the second phase to be implemented in June of 2025. The agency anticipates expending all of the ARPA coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds and indicates the U.S. Department of Labor is expected to be awarding unemployment insurance modernization grants, and the agency is expected to apply for the grants when the time comes. Subsequent to the budget hearing on March 7th, the agency and Governor's Finance Office concurred that projected expenditures for the system modernization should be included in the 23-25 biennium budget, And the agency projects to expend $20.4 million in fiscal year '24 and $23.6 million in fiscal year 2025 for the project, as shown in the top table on page 79. In the second table on page 79 shows how the expenditures would be broken down between transfers to the information development and processing budget to support intermittent positions and contract expenditures, and the unemployment insurance budget to support 63 intermittent positions. The total expended funds projected by the agency of the ARPA funds for the modernization would be $46.2 million, which would leave approximately $7.8 million in federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds and reserves in fiscal 25 to support costs in fiscal year 2026. To continue to monitor the implementation of the unemployment insurance system modernization throughout the 23-25 biennium, the subcommittee may wish to consider recommending issuing a letter of intent to receive semi-annual updates on the projects, including an overview of the activities completed, any identified deviations, and timeline updates as laid out at the bottom of page 79. And as noted, the $32.6 million are duplicated in each year of the 2024 and fiscal 2025 budgets, and fiscal staff will adjust the revenue budgeting based on the decisions made by and technical adjustment authority granted by the full committees at the COVID-19 relief programs budget work session and closing hearing. The decision for the subcommittee on page 80 is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of budgeting $20.4 million in fiscal year 24 and $23.6 million in fiscal year 25 in coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds in a special use category to continue the unemployment insurance system modernization, and budgeting $7.8 million in fiscal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds in reserves in fiscal year 2025 for the system's maintenance cost, which the agency projects to expend in fiscal year 2026. And does the subcommittee wish to recommend issuing a letter of intent instructing the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation to report semi-annually to the Interim Finance Committee on the status of the modernization of the unemployment insurance system?
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to other closing items.
There's one other closing item on this budget, which would be to align the penalties and interest revenue in the base budget with the agency's projected forecast. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing item be closed with the noted technical adjustment and requests authority for fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much. Any comments on the motion? Or, sorry, we don't have motion. We have questions on the closings. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I will make that motion.
A second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion now? Still none. Okay, moving on. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Wonderful. We're moving on to, which budget is it now? 3274, Information Development and Processing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Information Development and Processing budget begins on page 83, which provides information technology services for the department. There is one major closing issue in this budget, which is decision unit adjustments and operating reserve level. The governor recommends reserves of $799,266 in fiscal year 24 and $792,904 in fiscal year 2025, which represent approximately 17 days of operating expenditures compared to the agency's targeted reserve level of 30 days for this budget. This budget is primarily funded with cost allocation reimbursements. On page 84 is additional information that describes how 3 decision units, E710, E721, and E722, are funded with reserve reductions and should instead be funded with cost allocation reimbursement revenue. Those are in the first box on that page, the first 3 decision units. And then decision units E800 and M100, the other 2 on the table, are funded with cost allocation reimbursement revenues. However, they also include adjustments that increase reserves totaling $4.9 million over the 2023 biennium, which is inconsistent with the Governor's Finance Office's budget manual, which indicates the decision units E and M800 should only reflect maintenance and enhancement decision units. So fiscal staff recommends technical adjustments to eliminate the reserve reductions in those first 3 decision units, and then technical adjustments to eliminate the reserves in the decision units M800 and E800, which would result in the table at the bottom of page 84. Considering those adjustments, additional cost allocation reimbursement revenue is needed in each year of the biennium to achieve the targeted 30-day reserve level. The Governor's Finance Office and agency concur that cost allocation reimbursement revenue should be $15.6 million in fiscal 24 and $14.5 million in fiscal 25, which is an increase of approximately 4% in fiscal year 24 and a decrease of 0.2% in fiscal year 25 compared to the Governor's recommended cost allocation reimbursement revenue in this budget. The decision for the subcommittee on page 85, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of decision units E710, E721, E722, E800, and M800 with the noted technical adjustments, resulting in a net increase in cost allocation revenues of $532,787 over the 2023-25 biennium, consisting of decision units E710, 721, and 722, eliminate reserve reductions in these decision units, and increase cost allocation reimbursement revenue by $1.9 million in fiscal year 24 and $1.2 million in fiscal year 25. Part 2 is decision units E800 and M800, eliminate reserves in these decision units and decrease cost allocation reimbursement revenue by $2.3 million in fiscal 24 and $322,497 in fiscal year 25. And in addition, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval to increase cost allocation reimbursement revenue in the base budget by $945,129 in fiscal year 24 and decrease cost allocation reimbursement revenue by $956,702 in fiscal year 2025 to meet the targeted 30-day reserve level and provide fiscal staff with authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
Okay, I have a first from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Moreno. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving to other closing items.
The first other closing item at the bottom of page 25 is a software license transfer through 2 decision units, one of which would transfer an expenditure to this budget from the Nevada P20 workforce reporting budget. That would be the E901, and then through decision unit E501 would change the funding source in this budget for the expenditure, which is already funded with reserves in the base budget in this budget. So it's a duplicate request. So fiscal staff recommends not approving decision unit E901 and recommending a technical adjustment to eliminate the general fund appropriations and reserves in E501 and instead to establish transfers of $13,880 in each fiscal year from the Nevada P20 workforce reporting budget with a corresponding decrease in cost allocation revenue. The second item is intermittent positions and contract expenditures, which is corollary to the discussion in the penalties and interest budget about budgeting for the system modernization expenditures, which fiscal staff requests authority to make technical adjustments consistent with the subcommittee's decision. The decision on page 86, fiscal staff recommends other closing item 1 be closed with the recommendation to not approve decision unit E901 and approve decision Unit E501 with the noted technical adjustment. Other closing item 2 be closed, including authority to make technical adjustments consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation in the Employment Security Special Fund budget related to the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds for the Unemployment Insurance System Modernization Project, and provide authority for fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to the next budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next budget is on page 89, the ESD Administration Budget Account 4773, which is Division Administrative Staff, which is funded through a division cost allocation. There are 4 other closing items in this budget, and the 4th one includes a technical adjustment to adjust expenditures for new equipment. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 3 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 4 be closed with the recommended technical adjustment, and requests authority for fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on this budget? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will now begin presenting the budgets which the subcommittee has not previously reviewed for the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing the closing recommendations. I will pause following each of the budgets to allow for questions. And when I have finished the last budget and questions have been addressed, the chair may wish to ask for a single motion, which is included in the last page of the document. The first budget on page 91 is the Office of Workforce Innovation Budget Account 1004, which is GOIN, that provides support to DETR, the Governor's Workforce Investment Board, and industry sector councils. There are 8 other closing items in this budget, and the closing recommendation for this budget is included in the summary page in the closing packet.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this budget? Seeing none, moving on.
The next budget is the Equal Rights Commission Budget Account 2580, which oversees the state's Equal Employment Opportunity Program. There are no major closing issues in this budget, and 1 recommended adjustment to the base budget to align ARPA planned expenditures of ARPA funds with the agency's projection through the 24-25 biennium. The other closing items are on page 94, and the closing recommendations for this budget are included in the summary page in the closing packet.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, moving on to 3253.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 95 is the Blind Business Enterprise Program budget, which provides blind individuals seeking self-sufficiency the opportunity to operate snack bars and vending operations in certain federal, state, and municipal buildings across the state. There are no major closing issues, and 5 other closing items for this budget and closing recommendations for this budget are included on the summary page.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, okay, moving on to 3254.
The services to the blind or visually impaired begins on page 97. There are no major closing issues. The other closing items, number 5, includes the 10% of the recommended funding of Social Security Administration funds for the Disability Benefits 101 website. Fiscal staff recommends this decision unit be approved consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation in the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation budget. And closing recommendations are included in the summary page.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on to 3268.
The Rehabilitation Administration budget on page 99 provides administrative support to the agencies within the division. There are 4 other closing items for this budget, and closing recommendations are included in the summary page.
Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to 3269.
The Bureau of Disability Adjudication provides medical disability decisions to individuals who file claims for disability benefits under the Social Security Administration's disability insurance and supplemental security income programs. There are 3 other closing items for this budget, and the closing recommendations are included in the summary page.
Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on.
Page 103 is the Nevada P20 Workforce Reporting Budget Account 3270, which maintains the state's longitudinal data system, which integrates education and workforce data to allow stakeholders to improve the educational system and workforce training programs. There are 4 other closing items for this budget. The 4th one is the companion to the decision unit in the information development and processing budget for the license expenditure transfer, which fiscal staff recommends not be approved because the funding, as discussed, exists already in the information development and processing budget. Closing recommendations are included in the summary page.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on to 3273.
Page 105 is the Research and Analysis Division, which is the primary source of labor market and economic information for DETR. There are 8 other closing items in this budget, and closing recommendations are included in the summary page.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, moving on to 4770.
The Workforce Development Budget, which provides job placement services and labor market information to employers and job seekers. There are no major closing items in this budget. The Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds chart at the bottom of page 107 leads to the base budget adjustments recommended to align the agency's updated projections for providing subgrants as approved by the IFC to align the expenditures with their budget in the 23-25 biennium. There are 7 other closing items. Number 7 is adjustments to the cost allocation decision units to align the revenue sources for the decision units, and closing recommendations are included in the summary page.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to 4772.
The unemployment insurance budget on page 111, there are 5 other closing items in the table. The 6th is the intermittent positions for the claims backlog, which is the receiving side of the penalties and interest decision unit. Fiscal staff recommends this be approved consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation in the other budget. And item 7 on page 112 is the intermittent positions for the unemployment insurance system modernization, and fiscal staff requests authority to make technical adjustments to align this budget with the decisions made in the Employment Security Special Fund budget. Closing recommendations are included on the summary page in the closing packet.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, any questions on this budget or any of the others? Oh, Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all, and thank you for putting this together. And through all of this, I didn't see any comments, and maybe they, if it's okay with you, could tell us a percent of outstanding fraud claims. Was one of the questions that we had before, and just wondering where we are in that, since this is the last time we're going to be hearing this budget.
Thank you very much. Please come to the table.
For the record, Chris Sewell, Director, DETR. The outstanding number of fraud claims, I'm going to turn over to our chief. She is the one that delves into this and every single day, and she knows the numbers backwards and forwards, and I would probably mess them up like I stumbled earlier. So I'm going to let Nancy Medina handle this question for you. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Nancy Medina. Fraud is still being identified. We do have a lot of claimants that misrepresented facts that we are going back. Due to our fraud statute, we can go back 4 years from the date that it was detected. So currently, that we have identified and we are pending to investigate with our investigations unit and compliance audit investigators is about 553 claims. Of course, that does not include all the other ones that are under reviewed. And we are identifying these through wage cross matches and additional tips and leads.
Follow-up, Madam Chair? So thank you for that. So your last statement was, so the 553 doesn't include the 47,000 that are still out on prior testimony. You had 47 adjudications, and there could be fraud in that, but that may or may not exist, right?
The 47,000 are PUA identified fraud.
Okay.
The 553 that we have now been identifying is for unemployment insurance fraud, which include unreported earnings, failure to report employers.
Okay. So you said, I don't think we had 47,000 fraud cases.
No.
You didn't mean to say that.
No.
Yeah, the 47,000 outstanding claims still for adjudication and discovery earlier. That I didn't mean that they were fraud. I was just making sure that that number, there may be some fraud on that, but you haven't identified anything more. The ones that you've identified as potential fraud are 553.
Yes, the
Okay.
47 are composed of multiple things.
Okay, great, very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and we will hear this again at the final closings. So, great. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll let you go along.
On page 113 of your closing packet, fiscal staff recommends that the following budgets be closed as recommended by the governor, with the technical adjustments noted, and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. Budget account 1004, the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. 2580, the Equal Rights Commission, including technical adjustments to reduce coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds by $141,703 in fiscal year 2024, with a corresponding decrease in expenditures to align with the agency's projections. 3253, the Blind Business Enterprise Program. 3254, services to the blind or visually impaired, including the recommendation to close Decision Unit E240 consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation in the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation budget. 3268, the Rehabilitation Administration budget. 3269, Disability Adjudication. 3270, the Nevada P20 Workforce Reporting, including the recommendation to not approve Decision Unit E901, which would increase general fund appropriations in this budget by $13,880 in each fiscal year. 3273, Research and Analysis. 4770, Workforce Development, including technical adjustments to eliminate interagency transfers and increase wage assessment revenue by $59,199 over the 2023-25 biennium in Decision Units E800 and M800, and to decrease coronavirus state fiscal recovery fund subgrant expenditures by $91,242 in fiscal year 24 and increase subgrant expenditures by $359,894 in fiscal year 2025, with a corresponding adjustment to the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds to align with the agency's projection for the 2023-25 biennium. And budget account 4772, unemployment insurance, including the recommendation to approve Decision Unit E225 to fund 60 intermittent positions consistent with the subcommittee's recommendations in the Employment Security Special Fund budget, and request to provide fiscal staff authority to make technical adjustments consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation in the Employment Security Special Fund budget related to the ARPA coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds for the Unemployment Insurance System Modernization Project.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I would so move to recommend the closing as read by staff.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And with that, we have completed our budget closing. So thank you very, very much. And next on our agenda is public comment. The call-in number is on the agenda, but real quick, it is, what is it? 888-475-4499 with the meeting ID of 8831-250-6953. You want to say something for coming? Wonderful. We will start with you.
Thank you. For the record, Chris Sewell, Director of Dieter. I said I was going to be extremely transparent and forthcoming with this committee and the legislature as a whole. There is one area that we had a discussion on that I haven't covered yet, and that is overpayments. We have processed 10,261 overpayment requests approved. We have around 6,800 pending overpayment requests that we will be processing. I've been told it's going to be about 6 to 8 months to process that, so I'm going to say 7 months. It'll be done. But I wanted to make sure that you guys know what is going on. We also took your recommendation. It's on the front page of our website. You go to the Dieter website, it's there. We have an FAQ section. We have the forms. We have everything. It's also spelled out in each one of those notices, so that if someone needs to file for that overpayment waiver, they can, and we will process it. And those are recommendations you guys made that we instituted. And thank you. Another area, our new computer system. I can tell you, I was told the other day, we're ahead of schedule already. That means all the work that every one of these individuals behind me did to get ready for this system, to do the RFP properly, to get EATS involved, to get purchasing involved, to get other agencies involved, worked. And we're ahead of schedule. I hope to come back and say, you know, we're so far ahead of schedule, we're going to move our date. I'm not going to do that yet. But I want to be able to do that. As I said, I am going to be very honest and forthcoming with this body. And I promise you that. And this is also my one time to say thank you to everyone behind me. As I said, I just drive the ship. They do the real work. And thank you for all of the help and the encouragement and the ideas. Thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. And we actually have a question from Speaker Yeager.
Thank you for allowing me to ask a question, Madam Chair, and thank you for the in-person update. I really appreciate that. I just had a clarifying question. So when you say the overpayments process, are these folks who have asked for waivers of the overpayment that you're talking about?
For the record, Chris Sewell, yes. They've asked for those waivers, and they were granted, and they were processed.
Great. And then if I could just ask one more, Madam Chair, I don't know if you have this information, because obviously there's two groups of people, right? There's the overpayment letters that were issued, and then those who have asked for some kind of waiver or exemption. But how many people are in the category who have not asked for a waiver? Do you know what that number is in terms of letters that were sent out, but maybe you had no, maybe they're paying, or maybe you've had no communication with those folks since the letters were sent?
For the record, Chris Sewell, I'm going to have my expert answer that question because she's going to know.
Great, thank you.
For the record, Nancy Medina, we currently have 104,000 billing notices that are pending, that will be generated and go out.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your staff for all the hard work. It's a daunting task, so thank you. Appreciate you. Anyways, please go ahead when you're ready with public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Leah Case, Leacase, here today on behalf of the Children's Advocacy Alliance. First, I wanted to give a huge shout out to the Department of Health and Human Services and especially the Welfare and Supportive Services Division. They have sat with us in numerous conversations, going through the budget process with us, so we can make sure that children and families are getting the supports that they need. In those conversations, and I know this is late in the process, but as part of those conversations, we have found one barrier that families are facing. I did bring this up in the budget subcommittee in public testimony, but wanted to keep it on your radar in case there is an opportunity to fix this. In NRS 422A.570, there's a limitation on the receipt of benefits for TANF. That's in subsections 1 and 2. That means that families can be on TANF for 24 months and then they have to have a 12-month cooling off period and then they can reapply and be on TANF. There is a process for a 6-month extension that has been helpful, but that takes staff time. So there's a backlog when you need to get these applications processed and you need the staff to get off of their other cases and come and do this reapplication process. So it's just kind of this shift that we need to head towards. The recommendation here from our group would be to just align this with the federal guidelines that say you have 60 months of benefits, you can use them all at once, cumulatively, you can use them across your life, but to remove the state statute that has this 24 months on, 12 months off, 24 months on, 12 months off, that's creating a barrier for some of our families and children in Nevada. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please go ahead when ready.
Chairs Golo and Wynn and members of the subcommittees, my name is Caitlin Modena, an administrator at Wingfield Skilled Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, here today to ask for your support in giving nursing homes an additional Medicaid rate increase. I have worked in long-term care for my entire career and have held almost every position in a nursing home, so I know firsthand what it's like to be on the front lines. Between our facility and our sister facilities, a large portion of our residents rely on Medicaid as their payer source. But as you know, there is a significant gap between what Medicaid pays us and what we spend on care. We currently care for about 100 to 105 residents. While our occupancy rates have improved since the COVID-19 pandemic, we have the capacity for 120 residents. The biggest barrier in accepting more residents are our staffing shortages, particularly clinical staff such as certified nursing assistants, registered nurses, and licensed practical nurses. We never want to turn people away who need help, but we will not take in more residents than our staff can safely care for. Adequate Medicaid funding would mean that we would have the resources we need to invest in our workforce. We could hire the caregivers we need and, as such, take in more residents who need the compassionate, high-quality care we provide. Please help Nevada seniors today and approve an additional rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Carson City who would like to come to the table for public comment? Okay, seeing none. Oh, they left. There were some people in Vegas, but they're gone. So I'll say that they don't want to do public comment. Broadcasting, is there anyone on telephone who would like to do public comment?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, you are unmuted and may begin.
Good morning. Could you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair and the rest of the outstanding committee. Thank you, Madam Chair, for announcing the call-in ID number. I was memorizing it and I call it. So thank you so much for providing that. This is Dora Martinez, member of the Nevada Disability Peer Action Coalition. I'm an advocate. I just want to thank Mr. Chris Duell. Sir, since you've taken office, it's Dieter, the blind division, because I am blind, I use their services. Now I was able to get on the program, and I appreciate you and your transparency and moving forward with the big old ship. I just want to let you know and put this on your radar. I heard that you guys were all talking about system technology and IT people that you're trying to increase their pay or hire or something like that, the website that we go on your website and then try to apply, because that's what I did. Somebody told me that it was accessible. I do use an iPhone only, and it's not 100% accessible. There is still some more room to be improved. So please, if you need help, we are here. And it is always good to include people with disability, because this is our life. We breathe, talk, eat Jaeger donuts. Breathe disability. So thank you so much and have a great day. Appreciate everything you do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martinez. Broadcasting next caller, please.
Chair, there are no additional callers at this time.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we will close public comment. I would like to take a moment and thank our staff for all the wonderful hard work they did. Fiscal, we really appreciate you going through these budgets. And just want to see if the committee, do you have any comments? Okay, Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank them for achieving their goal of being finished by 10:30.
That they did. Good job. All right, thank you, everyone. And with that, have a great day and be safe. We're adjourned.